All right, everybody, here we are. I'm Jeff Gluck along with Jordan Bianchi, and we're coming to you on a historic day for NASCAR. I don't think that's underselling it in any way, as a settlement has been reached in the NASCAR Antitrust lawsuit. The trial's over. That's it. This was going to be day 9, and it is all done. The sides have come to an agreement, and sort of in a surprising way. And Jordan and I will take you through that, of course. But man, our heads are spinning right now. We certainly didn't know when we came to court this morning that this was going to be the outcome. There was no indication, I guess, from where we left off. You know, we talked to you guys last night, if you watched our episode, and at the end of our episode, we talked about how this didn't seem to be going particularly well for NASCAR, and that we were hoping that a settlement would be reached to save the sport, essentially, because it didn't seem like this was going to end in a positive outcome otherwise. And sure enough, Jordan was supposed to start at 8:30 this morning.
Yep.
And but at 8:10, 20 minutes before court was actually supposed to be in session, there was a very odd vibe in the courtroom. Something was happening. Suddenly, both sides were huddling, conferencing with their attorneys. Larry Buterman was walking over, talking to Lisa Kennedy, and they were leaning in, talking to Jim France. Jeffrey Kessler on his side of the courtroom was gathering his group, Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, Curtis Polk, who was back in the courtroom, meaning he had been NASCAR had pulled him off the witness list.
Yeah, because he was going to be a NASCAR witness, and he's supposed to testify this week when he can't be in the courtroom if he's going to testify. So when you see his presence, you knew he was off the witness list, which was a surprise in and of itself.
Right.
And you started seeing other people around that you hadn't really seen around very much.
So suddenly, 8:16 a.m., Judge Bell comes in and he says, there's some issues at hand here, and let's go to a sidebar. So the attorneys, they all go off, outside the room, back by the judge's chambers. 13 minutes, they're back in the room, and Professor Z, who is waiting to come up and explain more about his book, I guess,
He's got more books,
the textbook that he has taught. By the way, people looked it up last night. $260 for that textbook.
Textbooks are a racket. Like, it's an absolute racket.
Yeah.
The schools need to lower that price.
Professor Z, though, is waiting to testify. And Judge Bell says, no, don't come up yet.
As he's starting to walk onto the witness, he's starting to literally in front of the judge, walking across the courtroom to get on the witness stand. The judge is like, no. You want you to sit back down, and everybody start laughing.
So at 8:31, the jury is brought in, and Judge Bell lets us in on, gives us a little hint what's going on here. Says the jury, I met with the attorneys, and we're going to sacrifice an hour of your time. Sorry you came in early and on time, and now we're just going to waste an hour of your time, but we need an hour to see if we can save you several hours. I really do believe this will save you a lot of time in the long run, and we're going to be in recess now for an hour. And then he says, if you guys need to use the 4th floor, some room, conference room, library or something for talking, then that's fine. And it's like, what could be going on here?
At that point, the alarm bells were going off. I know internally for us, and you and I were having conversations of like, it's obvious we've covered enough. We know enough what's going on. And then from there, we both started, doing our jobs, I guess, effectively, and quickly realized that we were told that this is what was happening. And then in fact, they were discussing settlement, and they were moving to that. And it was a matter of whether they were going to get it to the finish line or not. As we know throughout this case, there have been many moments where they have had conversations, and it kind of maybe felt like something may happen or something was out there to potentially happen, and it didn't materialize. And in fact, for a moment there, Jeff, it actually felt like we were going down that road again. So they're having all these meetings. Everybody's kind of in different rooms talking, and there's a lot of going back and forth, right? A lot of people, like I said, a lot of people in the building that we had seen, throughout the week. And it was obvious that these discussions were happening. We had been told this. And then the judge comes back in, and Jeff?
Yeah, so it's 9:59 a.m. now. So it's an hour and a half later, not an hour later. And Professor Z starts walking back up to the stand.
Again.
And it's like, oh, I guess something must have fallen through. And Josh Haffenbrack, who was doing the cross-examination of Professor Z for the plaintiffs, he's at the mic, and the Judge Bell says, "Do you have everybody you need to continue your examination of the witness?"
And it was,
and he's
go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, he says, "Just 1 minute." Jeffrey Kessler is going to come in. He says, "Oh, he must be, very important, Jeffrey Kessler. You can't start without him."
But NASCAR sport wasn't even in there at that point.
Yeah,
like no Jim France, no Lisa Kennedy France. Like they're the players you would think that have been in the courtroom throughout this whole thing for the most part. Now, MJ and
they weren't in there either.
They weren't in there yet either.
Yep.
And so like nobody was in there that you thought. And you're like, okay, we're going to start the proceedings. And it just felt kind of, I don't say half-assed because that's not the case, but it just felt like this is weird. Like this.
Well, in hindsight, I think the judge was getting impatient.
I think this is exactly what I think it was too. This was Judge Bell's like way of like kind of kicking them in the butt a little bit of like, okay, you're all going to drag this out again because you've done this before. You've had these talks and then they fell apart. We're not doing that again. Like we're getting this done. You guys are that close. I'm gonna put that carrot in front of you. And this was him sticking the carrot in front of the donkey and be like, okay, yeah, we're resuming this thing.
Right.
And then
so Jeffrey Kessler does come in and he says he's sort of just not flustered, but just like coming in up the middle aisle of the courtroom instead of from their room. He says, "Your Honor, just waiting for a little bit more information, just need to close the loop. And the other side is downstairs going through security right now. Can you just give me 1 more minute here?" Okay. So he's like, okay. So he goes back out. He walks in the courtroom at 10:04 a.m. and he walks up to his microphone. He says, "Your Honor, I am pleased to say the parties have positively settled this matter in a way that will benefit the industry going forward." But Judge Bell, being Judge Bell, no nonsense again, is like, "Well, how much longer is this going to take? I gave you an hour. Now look at what time it is." And Jeffrey Kessler's like, "There's literally typing in the last few things. There's no more open items." And Judge Bell says, "Okay, well, I'm just going to actually still sit right here just to keep motivating you. I'm not going to leave. So go ahead and finish this." Right. Yeah, go ahead.
No, at that point, I left the courtroom for a minute, went downstairs, conversed with our editor about our story that we had going, and so we could get that moving. And you were up in the courtroom, so I'm not sure what happened. I just know down on the floor, there was a lot of people, a lot of hustle and bustle of people coming into the court that hadn't been there. A lot of local news that were like getting alerts of like, oh, this may be happening. They were arriving. A lot of cameras were being set up outside. So that was the scene down below.
So we're now just observing everybody, right? We're just waiting for stuff to happen. We're observing anybody. I see that Denny and Michael Jordan are very much smiling. They're shaking hands. They're shaking hands with Bob Jenkins. Denny pats Bob Jenkins on the back.
Kind of shakes him over there. Kind of like shakes his shoulders a little bit. Kind of does the
right. Like this is.
I can't believe we did this, man. Like way to go. We like celebration. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. They were rejoicing.
Yeah, it's sort of like the last lap when a driver is coming to the checkered flag and they show that on the pit box. They show the crew and they're like, "Oh yeah."
They're waiting. They're waiting. Like they're just waiting for that moment. And
to cross the check. They were obviously extremely happy with whatever the outcome was going to be. And so at that point, MJ sitting there with he's had a cup of venti holiday cup of Starbucks every day. He's always had this, and I think he must get refills because he's chugging this thing all the time.
Do you think he's got to get some refills? I'm sure.
I think they bring them lunch, and
they do bring him lunch. Yeah, every day, it's all good.
But he's got the classic. He had the black hoop earring in, as Drake once referenced, and he's looking around, and he kind of like peers over at us, and we're just watching him, right? To see us. Okay, you sure? And we're smiling. We're like, what's going on here? And he's like, what are you guys smiling at?
Oh, he said, why are you smiling?
Yeah, why are you smiling? Okay, yeah. And you said, oh, it's
been a good day for you.
Good day for you? And he said, good day.
Good day.
Yep.
And he had and then he told me to stop talking to him.
Well, I was like, don't like interfere with I didn't want like to come this far. Don't like get scolded by the court or something. The judge is sitting up there.
Great. MJ gets thrown out of court as the settlement talks.
Or you.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to, So Anyway,
But
10:21 a.m. they arrive with the paperwork, and Larry Buterman says, "Your Honor, I understand you want to see the executed agreement before we, go through with this." And he said, "Yes, I do." So they bring it up to him. He reads it. At this point, Steve O'Donnell's in the courtrum for the first time since his testimony. Ben Kennedy is in for the first time since the whole trial, I think, right?
Ben Kennedy hadn't been there since
was he there for opening statements?
He was over for opening statements.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So he's sitting up in the front with his mom Lisa and Jim France. On the other side, of course, you have Curtis Polk's there, Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, Bob Jenkins, and it's winding down now. Buterman walks over and shaking hands with Michael Jordan, pats him on the back. And so then Bell finishes reading it, and he says, "Do the parties agree to settle all issues before the jury?" Both Kessler and Buterman stand up and say, "Yes, Your Honor." He says, "Okay, bring the jury in." The jury comes in 10:27 a.m. Members of the jury, I know that 1 hour sort of turned into 2 hours here, and I apologize for that, but it was productive. This case has been settled. And I was looking at the jury's face, and one woman was kind of
there was a couple of people that were like, "Whoa, really?"
But the rest of them didn't really react hardly at all.
I think they were just processing.
So then he goes, "That means the trial is over." And the whole courtroom just laughs. And the one juror on the end, he goes,
he did a little dance, he did a little jig. He did it also when he got off the witness stand. The jury box.
He was pumped. And he then said something to the judge, that guy in the end. I couldn't hear what he said, but people laughed at that too. So they are then told that the court clerk believes this is her favorite jury of all time, is what she had told the judge. And he tells the jury that, and he tells them that he was extremely impressed because he could tell that they were being very diligent and listening, that they understood this complicated case. He feel really good as a judge. And he says, I was with these parties in mediation. When was that? Back in August or something. And, he said, I couldn't, what you've done the last 9 days, I couldn't achieve what you did. And you enabled the parties to see the wisdom of the settlement. He told them that they are now free to talk to each other and to other people finally about the trial. He said, because he keeps telling them you can't read anything. And he says, now you can read whatever you want. And there's been a lot written about it, he tells them.
One juror member asked, does this mean we don't get paid for tomorrow?
Oh, is that what the guy said?
Yeah.
That was what he said then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we not get paid for tomorrow? I don't blame him.
So he then tells the sides, thank you for this. This is a surreal feeling. What's happening right now is the whole feeling I had. I can't speak for Jordan, but it's like, whoa, this is crazy. This is actually happening. They have actually come to an agreement. They've actually reached the terms. And this is what the judge has to say about the terms that he just read on this sheet. He says, thank you for all your hard work. I wish that you would have done this a couple months ago, but it was the right thing to do. I congratulate all of you. This is going to be great for NASCAR, great for the entity NASCAR, the industry NASCAR, the teams, the drivers, and ultimately, as you have so often said yourselves, the fans. I'm very happy with this settlement. He then makes a joke. The attorneys then thank both sides, the judge for his work as well. And the judge says that it was nice working with them despite, quote, all the alleged errors I committed in this case. Talking about the NASCAR. We told you guys that NASCAR was calculating up because they had this stuff appeal. So then, Jordan, I think this, for me, was one of the most surreal moments of my entire life. Definitely one of my career. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing in front of me. And to paint the picture for you, there's been some moments when, Jim France during the trial would walk over and say a couple things to Bob Jenkins and they'd laugh and you'd be like, oh, they're kind of at odds. Or, you'd have Larry Buterman, the attorney, joking with Michael Jordan and stuff. But, this was a very, as you guys know, who watched this the whole time.
Ugly, contentious, bitter. I mean, just brutal. It was knocked down, drag out.
Yeah. I mean, we heard Denny Hamlin's sort of like hatred for the France family, right? Like,
I think he said that as much.
Yeah. I mean, it was the
Vitriol.
most bad blood, right?
The vitriol between the sides was intense.
So suddenly it's over, and the sides get up, and all the main characters from this story that we've been painting this picture for you guys the entire time. If there's one moment I wish you guys could have seen, I wish there was a camera in there for you guys to see this moment. It was this, because suddenly you have Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, Bob Jenkins, Curtis Polk, who it was made to be a villain by the other side. Obviously, Jeffrey Kessler, they're lawyers, right? Then you have Jim France, Lisa, Mike Helton,
Ben Kennedy, Steve O'Donnell.
Yeah, Steve O'Donnell, and you've got Yates, you've got Buterman, all the
players,
parties,
all
right?
the players in this whole thing.
And it's suddenly like everybody has dropped their swords and their armor, and there starts to be all these handshakes crossing over. The first one I see is Michael Jordan and Steve O'Donnell walk up to each other and shake hands. Michael Jordan, pats Steve O'Donnell on the back. Then O'Donnell and Scott Primer shaking hands with Curtis Polk. Then
I saw O'Donnell and Curtis Polk shaking hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is wild in itself.
Scott Prime is shaking hands with Denny Hamlin. Michael Jordan bro hugs Larry Buterman. They have a bond, right? The judge comes down. He's done with the trial, and he starts shaking hands with the parties. He talks to the people from both sides. Jeffrey Kessler and Steve O'Donnell. Then one of the moments I'll never forget, Denny Hamlin and Jim France hug. Like a hug. Not even just like a bro hug, handshake. Like they had a real hug.
And not the first positive interaction from not the only interaction from them. We're gonna have more later, because there was this was kind of a theme.
Yeah, Ben Kennedy and Michael Jordan, Helton and Michael Jordan, Helton and Denny had a hug, and it's just like, man, all this emotion, all this moment, this whole sports history is riding on this, and it could be if the car was headed toward the cliff.
Yeah,
this could have been the worst possible outcome, and truly destroyed the sport. And now you have all these people, not even any cameras there, right? Coming together, and they're all embracing, and they're all sort of having this peace to move forward, the most bitter of enemies, right? And it was just like this unbelievable thing to see and experience. It actually kind of made me like sort of overwhelmed emotionally. Like it was just like, holy crap. Like,
really?
Yeah, it was like, not like, tear up way, but like, man, like just, whoa, this just feels huge. Like it just felt unbelievable. So
it reminded me of, I've heard the stories, I've read the books about World War I, and there's trench warfare in World War I. These trenches,
history buff here. This guy's absolute history buff. And
these trenches for the opposing sides were just a few very, very close, 100 yards close to each other. And when they signed the armistice and the war ended, it's like both sides came out of their trenches and met in the middle and shook hands. They dropped their arms and started shaking hands. And, basically the feeling you're describing, this was it. It was like, a day ago we were combatants and we wanted to hurt each other and, hurt and kill each other. And now we're brothers in arms, and we're going to have this moment, and we just went through hell together. And this is, in many respects, this was the NASCAR version of that. If you had two warring sides, you had two sides that were absolutely out for blood. You had two sides, and I don't think this is an understatement in saying this, that had never gone into a negotiation and ever not been the primary dominant force. And every time NASCAR, the France family, anytime MJ and his group have walked into a negotiation, they've held the stick. And this was the first time where they, in some respects, were meeting on equal terms. And they had somebody across from them at the table who was on the same footing as them. And now we saw how this played out. And it was hatred. It was animosity. We know that there were, on both sides, there was people that wanted to take the other person down. And there was a lot of questions about whether settlement could even be reached because of that hatred. Was the egos going to get in the way from sound, good judgment? Or were they out for blood and to kill the other side? And thankfully, some common sense was found here, and they found common ground as a result.
So what do we know? We know that 2311 and Front Row were given their charters back, obviously, as part of this settlement. So they will now be charter teams once again, and potentially forever, as long as they want to be in the sport, because we have learned that we've been told evergreen charters, which, we were told during the trial, evergreen, permanent, whatever. That is the case now. And now NASCAR will go around to every team that they've already signed the charter with, and every team that is a charter holder will become permanent charter holders. Everybody's getting permanent charters. And what a game changer this will be for the sport, as you can imagine, because there's no more risk of people having their charters gone after 7 years or whatever. And it sounds like they'll this is what was proposed. There'll have to be some sort of terms that you can't just show up and run like total crap. You have to fulfill certain duties, right? But these charters will be ongoing, and it sounds like they will just negotiate, Jordan, the economic terms,
Yep.
which is what was proposed all along, right? It was proposed in these letters in 2024 that we saw, like from Roger Penske and Rick Hendrick and stuff like that. This could have been avoided, obviously,
Years ago.
if Jim France had done that sooner, but that's one thing that they're getting, and it sounds like, Jordan, they may be getting even a lot more than that.
Yeah, from a reporting here, is you're right about the evergreen charters. The word I'm hearing to describe them are premier charters. We've heard permanent, evergreen, now it's premier. Regardless, the teams are getting them. They're going to keep them. There might be some provisions attached to that. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I'm hearing different things on that. It does sound like there could be some renegotiations coming to this down the road when the next NASCAR media rights deal is up after 2031. You may see them revisit these conversations about, hey, do we need to make some adjustments here or whatnot? But whatever those adjustments are, it isn't going to take away the fact that the teams get to keep the charters. And so they are going to get, for all intents and purposes, call them what you want. They're permanent. They may be called premier, but they are permanent charters. Another thing I'm hearing, we talked about the 4 pillars throughout all of this. One of the pillars, we've talked a lot about this in recent days, is governance. The teams not only wanted a seat at the table, they want to have a vote, and I'm hearing that that it's not the 3-strike rule anymore, Jeff. It's the 5-strike rule.
Okay.
That is coming back. So now the 5-strike rule is coming back. Now, what version of that is and how that's going to work, I think a lot of this is still going to have to be massaged and kind of worked out a little bit. But the teams are going to have a 5-strike rule on that. And also the other thing, and I've reported this before, and I've always kind of said that this is something to pay attention to as these negotiations unfold. The teams do not get any of the international media rights money, none. I have been told that they are now going to get a piece of the international media rights deal. Don't know what that number is, but they are going to get a slice of that. And it's, whatever they're getting is more than they were getting before. So just on itself, permanent charters and having a seat at the table and a vote, the 5-strike rule coming back, that's 2 of the 4 pillars for sure. That's a big win for NASCAR and for the NASCAR teams, and I guess NASCAR as a whole, because now the sport can move forward.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like this was a major win for the teams. I don't really know how you can view this another way. It seems like they got to last night. Obviously, Jim France finished his testimony yesterday morning, and the plaintiffs rested their case. And, as we talked about on the podcast, look, I mean, it seemed pretty, we're impartial. And so we're sort of in the same mindset that maybe, jury members would be in there, although we know obviously a lot more about the sport than the jury members who don't follow NASCAR. But just as an impartial person, you could see where this was going. I mean, unless NASCAR was going to be able to poke enough holes in this case, the whole case was contingent on, we already knew NASCAR was a monopoly. That was already established before the trial. And so what the plaintiffs had to show was, did they willfully maintain, extend that monopoly through anti-competitive acts to suppress potential competitors? And they tried to show this in 3 ways, right? And yes, the car was part of it. Yes, the teams were part of it. But the main way they were showing this was the track exclusivity agreements. That was their primary focus, it felt like, saying that they had locked up all the tracks, they had communications. And remember, to start this, our friend Shannon McMenemy, who was here with us for a couple days of the trial, had told us about the preponderance of the evidence. It wasn't beyond a reasonable doubt. What they had to do was a preponderance of the evidence. And she told us about the scales of justice being equal and basically a pebble tipping one slightly toward the other. That was all they were going to have to do. So based on everything we've heard, based on everything we've told you guys, it certainly seemed like this was going to tip a scale the team's way, it felt like, right?
Yeah.
And so I would assume that they got to last night and they said, man, like this is just, we're not going to be able to do enough at this point. And let's get out of this before more damage is done. Again, I'm assuming, but then we show up this morning and there's settlement talks,
NASCAR did a good job of kind of refuting a little bit about the next gen car stuff, and they tried to box the teams in with that. And I think John Probst did a good job with that yesterday. But to your point, Jeff, and I agree 100%, this was the thing that NASCAR really, really had a hard time refuting. And maybe whatever their intentions are, I'm not going to speak to that. Okay. The facts are the facts, and the texts and the emails, they speak for themselves. NASCAR did not like our SRX series. They were worried about it. They took steps to get rid of that series or box them in and kind of prevent their growth. They were worried about the teams at whether it was 2015, whether it was in 2019, 2020 area, whether it was 22, 23, as these negotiations were going. Multiple times through the years, that NASCAR was worried about the team starting a rival league. The evidence shows that overwhelmingly. And as a result, NASCAR took steps to enter into exclusivity contracts with the tracks. And that I don't know how you refute that. You can come back and counter, hey, we did this with the car and here's why and X, Y, Z. And they did a good job on that. This was the one thing at the end of the day, I just do not think they had enough evidence to refute. And the other thing is, and I mentioned this before the show, and I think this is something to be aware of, is a lot of times in these trials, and Shannon, when she was on here, she spoke to this, is a lot of times the plaintiffs will rest their case, and it's like a halftime break a lot of times. And you're like, okay, both sides kind of pull back and we're going to, the next day, the defense is going to, start up, right? And it's a kind of an opportunity to reassess. Yesterday, the plaintiffs rest their case, but there was no halftime break. There was no pausing. It literally was defense, you're up. They called John Probst, and we just kept rolling on. Last night was the first time after the plaintiffs had rested their case where both sides really got to sit down and actually assess everything and do an honest, real assessment. And I think in hindsight, I don't think either of us expected this at all today. We came in today, nobody, we didn't. I think in hindsight, I don't think we maybe should have been as surprised. Thinking about this now, thinking, you know what? Yeah, if I'm NASCAR, I'm looking at all this and they're like, oh man, we still got how many days? And is there anything left? And the other thing in this too is there was no smoking guns that we know of that NASCAR had. All of the big witnesses had really already testified, with the exception of Curtis Polk. But I don't know if he was going to swing the exclusivity thing. Like there was nothing that NASCAR, at least we know of, there was no evidence that NASCAR had that was going to really be able to refute that. And so hindsight being 2020, I don't think we should be all that surprised that this is the outcome today.
Well, I'm shocked.
And, I agree.
Here's why I'm shocked. I would have thought that if they were going to settle, a settlement would have come before, because I had heard enough, right? And then the last 2 days before this, we heard from Jim France, right? And you hear about how his close friends are begging him for permanent charters, to reconsider, to understand this financial model. His team, who turned out to, despite what people say about the Steve Phelps text about Richard Childress, which is obviously a heat of the moment thing that is going to haunt him. I mean, you saw the Johnny Morris letter. It's going to be tough for Steve Phelps to ever be able to shake that, right? Or for a while. But we know that from these communications that Steve Phelps, Steve O'Donnell, Scott Prime, they were moderates, right? They were trying to do deals with the teams. They were trying to be, O'Donnell was a team guy, he said at one point, right? And they're telling Jim France, hey, we really got to try to consider this. And we see from the text, he's a brick wall. Well, then once we saw him on the stand and heard from him, you're like, that guy is a brick wall, And so to me, it's like, yeah, the same guy who refused to give permanent charters despite everybody telling him and making the argument for it, even though he said he was a consensus builder, right? That same guy is probably the last decision maker on whether they settle or not. So then I went to bed last night thinking, okay, now I kind of feel like now I understand why they haven't settled, because it's the same guy who wouldn't do permanent charters, right? So to me, I was shocked this morning to come find out that, like, oh yeah, this is ending now. And we see there on the courthouse steps, MJ, Jim France, Denny Hamlin standing side by side.
Yep. During the press conference on the trial steps, Denny reaches over to Jim and does this, and puts his hand on his shoulder and kind of shakes him, and it's like, it was just odd seeing that. It like took me back. I was like, man, like you just espoused your hatred for him, and you went through all this, and now it's kumbaya and we're moving forward, and it's fascinating. And I echo the sentiments I said last night, kind of what you said of like, it always kind of felt like this is where it was going to end up. Like the way, Michael Jordan doesn't lose these things, man. And Jordan got the financial wherewithal to fight this, and they did. And the only way you really were ever going to put this aside and put this to bed was permanent charters, evergreen charters, premier charters, whatever whatever you want to call them. And it's just like,
fix your mic cover here, because this live stream's irritated it.
I know, they always are. It's not my fault.
It is. We actually switched microphones to make sure that I wasn't giving them a bad mic, because so many people on the live stream complain that Jordan's mic cover is always, I think it's the way you hold the microphone.
I don't know. The mic covers. Yeah. This could have been all the money and resources that was wasted on this. This could have it was just a waste. You basically took a bunch of money and lit it on fire.
Yeah.
Like, and the teams got what they deserve. The teams got permanent charters. They deserve permanent charters, but they should have gotten them years ago. They should have got them 2-3 years ago. And if you would have done that, the sport would have been better off. The image of NASCAR would not have taken the big hit it has over the weeks and months, and frankly, a couple of years now. This was just absolutely unnecessary.
It completely was. But I think about how this will change things going forward. So look, unless they're giving them a lot more money, and certainly NASCAR had to pay, by the way, some undisclosed amount, in heavy amount for the settlement itself to the teams that brought this lawsuit. But whether they give a little bit more money as part of the TV deal, that is unclear yet. We don't know. But what is happening, just permanent charters alone aren't going to change the business model. All the problems with the business model still exist, I would think. So, but what this is going to do is this going to potentially cause a huge injection of cash into the sport, because all these investors, these Wall Street firms and people like that who have been eyeing NASCAR sort of warily, right? Like, yeah, I mean, I'd love to invest in this, but it's, you look what just happened at 2311 and Front Row Charters. They got taken away after they were worth $40-50 million or whatever, right? I think whatever the charter price is that has been the record so far, 45 million, is it?
45 million, yeah, the legacy charter.
I bet within 2 years that will be up to 90 million, is my prediction. I think this is going to really encourage these outside investors to come in with cash, invest in these teams. There's going to be a lot more money coming into the sport because these will now be permanent charters, and they will be a lot more like franchises, right? And I think that, whether we don't know what NASCAR will do, but obviously it's been suggested that, look, hey, you could bring in investors yourselves, right? And we know that they have all these assets. Their debt is almost all gone. They've paid off their projects. They've paid off the purchase of ISC. And so, does NASCAR look at selling a piece of the company, the whole company? There's so many things that could happen now. But I really think that stability is going to be, in a financial sense, that is what's coming. Now, the question is, how does the fan base move forward? How does the fan base look at this and forgive what they've heard, or try to shrug this off and just say, okay, hey, let's go racing now? That's going to be more difficult, right? Like, you saw the Johnny Morris letter last night, and maybe that played a factor too in getting this over the finish line. Like, you're hearing from these people that are spending lots of money in the sport. There's a lot of hurt feelings. There's a lot of damage has been done. But as I said last night, if enough people can come together to make sure that this week was the low point in NASCAR history, essentially, like the bottom of the sport where things could have really gone worse, and they say this is as bad as it's ever going to get. We rebuild from here. We take a new approach going forward. Everybody does work together, because I do think that all these team owners that you heard from over and over again, the theme was, we want to have a partnership. We want to have a better partnership. Michael Jordan was chief among those saying this. We want to work together. We think we can make it better. And so when I see Denny Hamlin put his arm around Jim France, I think that is, hey, look, let's move forward together. And I think there's a real intent to do that. The question is, will the fan base come along for the ride? Will they forgive and forget? How will they view it? Will NASCAR have to make changes in their leadership structure? All those things are up for question right now. And those are the things that are going to happen over the next, week, month, years, whatever. Those things will start to be in motion. But financially, with the permanent charters, is a great first step to this sport thriving with its teams.
We have heard for so long from so many people on the team side of, if we had permanent charters, this will be a huge game changer for us in terms of growth and revenue streams and making these businesses more solvent and operational going forward. They're getting that now. And now the proof is going to be in the pudding, and we're going to see. And I with you, I agree. I think, there's evidence to suggest this is the case. Sports franchises across the board, and pick at any professional sport, just about, franchises are going up astronomically. I think you're going to see that in NASCAR now. The charter prices have already risen significantly over the last few years. It's now at $45 million for the lowest ranked charters, $45 million. Imagine now what some of these bigger charters with that have even more guaranteed revenue streams, what they're going to be worth. We don't know for sure yet. Maybe the teams are going to get some potential. We obviously, that what I've been able to report, they're getting money from the international media rights deal, it sounds like. Who knows what other revenue streams they may be able to tap into from NASCAR in terms of that. So that could be additional revenue for them. I'm never going to begrudge anybody for making money. But I think we can agree that we've learned the France family has made a lot of money. And I think it's okay to share some of that with everybody else, and that's going to be a good thing for this sport. But you need to your point, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, you've got to move past this. There's a lot of work to be done. I go back to one of the things that Michael Jordan said during his testimony. He spoke glowingly about the France family and the sacrifices they made and how they built this sport and their passion for the sport. This wasn't, for MJ, this was a business thing. This wasn't the France family's horrible people, et cetera, et cetera. No, they're good people. They've done a good job building the sport. They're making decisions we don't agree with, and we need to fix that. Now that has been remedied, I think you need to showcase that. I think you need to showcase that and have the people in the sport talk and work and show, like, hey, the people leading the sport do care. They are listening. They don't want to put the sport backwards. They want to move it forward. It takes a lot of work to do that, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to be interesting to see what the leadership structure is within NASCAR going forward. We said it last night. They obviously, the sentiment among fans, they have every right to think of, hey, what I felt about them feels justified now, and now NASCAR's got to put in the work to overcome that. And that's not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long, long time to do that, but this is a big first step. And now everybody together, teams and NASCAR, need to put this behind them and move forward.
Well, it's going to take a long time, as you said. I mean, taking a big picture step back here, there was 2 years where, again, the teams were asking for exactly what they end up just getting here. 3 years.
We sat in a. I'm sorry to interrupt. We sat in a conference room. You called in, but I sat in a conference room with 4 of the TNC members in a media session in October 2022, where they sat there and laid it out and said, "We need permanent charters. We need permanent charters." This has been, and that was when they told us. I mean, we heard this before, so this is not a new thing, and that's what the frustrating thing about this is like. This was something that inevitably was going to happen at some point, whether it was 3 years ago, 2 years ago, today, or 7 years from now when that TV rights deal is up. It was going to happen. And the sooner you get to that point, the better it is for everybody.
Well, the teams tried to get what they wanted through these negotiations. It didn't work out. 2 teams end up saying, hey, listen, if you're not going to don't make us do this, but we're going to bring this lawsuit. Probably the only person in the world that could have done it with the deepest pockets and a desire to not lose no matter what is Michael Jordan. Bankrolls this thing, says he wants to change the sports. They take him to court. Unfortunately, as a part of this, we get to see some of the ugly underbelly of some of the communications that come out. But we also got to pull back the curtain, and we all got to see together how this sport actually works, the finances, the agreements, all the communication,
the structure, the leadership structure. We saw things. I don't mean to interrupt. I apologize, but we saw things of how we always heard about the NASCAR board. We never knew that there was something beyond that. There's a board on top of a board. We learned that.
Yeah, it was crazy, and certainly for years to come, when we're talking about the sport, how much do the teams get again, or this? We'll be looking back at some of these numbers. These will go down in the historical record of NASCAR. We all got to see how it all worked. So, unfortunate that it got to this point, but also very fortunate that it didn't get any farther. And so now we will find out. Jordan, I see a lot of you asking in the chat, what are the exact terms? Jordan is missing an hour right now of texting people.
If you see me looking over, that's me looking at my phone. I've got, I don't even know how many text messages right now. It's going crazy.
He's going to get back to work, but before we go, obviously, this has been a week unlike any other for us. The media in general has never gone through anything like this. We sort of learned court stuff on the fly. Of course, a big thanks to Shannon McMenemy, who joined us for a lot of the episodes and was our legal expert. She was completely invaluable as a resource for us here. But this will will never happen again. I can't see a scenario where it does in NASCAR history. Although, one thing before I wrap this up, there will be another hearing next week because the Richard Childress NDA stuff's not going away, and the judge said they would be back in court 1 week from today to hash that out of because Childress not happy about that. They need to find out who gave who what and all that stuff. But that's this aside.
NASCAR is not done quite yet.
Yeah, but we just do want to thank you guys. We were just completely blown away and overwhelmed by the support that you guys showed us, the love you guys showed us. Jordan's certainly not used to it.
It's a very weird feeling. Never been so liked before. Most people usually hate me.
Well, I'll be back to playoff talk soon, Jordan. But we understand that so many of you were watching these streams and relying on this information. We've got notebooks full of stuff, and it was quite a journey. We don't know if we'll have another episode before the end of the year. You might not hear from us for a while. After this, I'm going to look at flights home and see how to get back. But we had lots of listeners we never knew about. In fact, just when I got back to my hotel, Jordan, the fire alarm went off here at the Residence Inn, a couple blocks from the courthouse. As you guys know, we've been recording here. And I was sitting outside typing on my computer. A man walked by, and he said, are you on a break? I don't know who this person is. And I was like, oh, for court? He's like, yeah, I listened to your podcast. And I was just in the car listening to it. I was like, oh, hey, yeah, we're actually, it's settled. It's done. I'm writing my story. And he's like, oh man, I'm actually, my name's Craig. I'm actually the regional manager here at the hotel, and I'm so sorry about the toilet. You guys said on the podcast the toilet was running and creating noise, and I feel so bad about that. And I was going to send somebody from maintenance up to fix it. So of all the people, so many people are listening. We would have never thought somebody from the hotel was listening. I do like this hotel for what it's worth. But it was an amazing amount of response for us. And again, so many people from the industry reached out. We're so humbled and touched by that. So thank you so much. And
thank you.
This is probably it for now, I guess. Have a great holidays. If we don't get to talk to you, we will be back. I mean, the off season is very short now, Jordan. So
yeah, I just want to echo Jeff's comments really quick. The comments have been just incredible. Like, it blows me away. Text messages, text, emails, even like just the support we've gotten from all of you. I humbly say thank you. It means a lot. We love doing this. It's been fun. It's been a great ride. This isn't over. We're gonna keep doing this. Just no more NASCAR, I guess. Maybe next week after next week hearing. But it genuinely. It means a lot that you guys have been so supportive and kind, and thank you so much.
Yeah, and obviously our producer Bobby as well, who's running all these live streams, and Dirty Mo took the audio editing off my hands, so I appreciate that. Colby Bass, Travis Rockhold, they've been cutting up clips, and everybody back at Dirty Mo's given us so much support as well, so we really appreciate them. For those of you who don't know, we do have a post-race podcast every Sunday. If you want to check us out for that. I know we got a lot of people that maybe haven't checked us out before after each NASCAR race, and thankfully there will be NASCAR racing. There will be a season now. That's a relief.
And 2311. Well, we knew there was going to be a season, but 2311 and Front Row are going to be a part of it.
I don't know if we knew there was going to be.
There was going to be a season. It was going to be a season in some form, but
yeah.
Now everybody's going to be there.
So everybody, again, thanks so much for listening. Glad you were along for this ride with us, and we will talk to you next time on The Teardown. See you, everybody.